Hello and welcome back to KXAN Plus. I am your host, Esmeralda Zamora, and this morning, if you're watching us live, happy Wednesday. Thanks for joining us. We have our Kristen's Classroom segment with our KXAN meteorologist, Kristen Currie. Kristen, thanks for joining me. How are you doing?
Pretty good. We got some rain this morning, which is
like
nice.
Fall.
Yeah, I think today is as close as fall as we're gonna get for the week. But as far as this morning goes, we've had a few lightning strikes kind of here and there. In fact, some of those storms up in the northwest were quite noisy. So if you woke up to thunder and lightning, I hear ya. They had a little bit of a bite, but no severe wind right now, no hail, no tornado. So this is kind of one of those rare good stuff kind of days where we're seeing a lot more good than anything concerning.
Yeah, middle of the week, waking up to some fresh weather. Yes. It's always nice, right?
Cooler weather after yesterday's 101. I mean, we should be done with triple digits. Typically, we finish those up at the end of August, but that 101 yesterday was our 16th, tied for 16th latest 100-degree day or hotter. So, oh yeah, girl, I'm ready for some fall-like weather.
They're still coming.
I know. And, it's nice because today we're talking about fall foliage or the changing of leaves, and it kind of tied nicely with this cold front coming in this morning. So not that, I was thinking about this last week saying, hey, I want to talk about the leaves changing before we get there. So it's kind of nice that Mother Nature was like, I'll throw you a bone and I'll listen and get a cold front headed your way.
A smooth transition to that
exactly.
topic.
She's usually not in my favor, but this morning she was.
Well, fall started on Monday, right? And it's not really looking like fall. Like you mentioned yesterday, it was so hot.
Yes.
The triple digits, we don't know if they're over. So why is it that we are already in fall and we're not really looking like it?
Yeah, it kind of is. What is your definition of fall, right? I will tell you.
Chilly.
When it comes to the fall-like weather, I tend to think more November here in Central Texas, because our average temperature is still 89 degrees this time of year, end of September. Average high about 89 and our average low is about 68, 69 this week. So, it takes a little while for these southern states to cool down. So yes, everybody flips into astronomical fall, September 22nd, September 23rd, even some years September 21st, but it takes a little longer for us to feel like it. Now, what does it take to look like fall? That's what I wanted to focus in on here because I think a lot of people are asking, when can we expect the leaves to change?
Yeah, I was about to say, what do you mean look like fall? Like colors?
Yeah, exactly. I'm thinking more the yellows and the oranges and the reds. Like when can we expect that? Well, not anytime soon. I can tell you that. I love this map here. This is from explorefall.com, our partners over there, and it shows you the average peak fall foliage. So when is the peak of when most of those trees are in their best or most vibrant colors, looking at a nationwide view first. So that blackish color is right now. Late September.
Make it bigger so we can see that.
Yeah, absolutely. Late September, and you can see that's the higher elevations.
Denver has it all.
The Rockies, Rocky Mountains, Intermountain West, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming. So right now they're starting to see those changing leaves here. The reds aren't too far off. I mean, that would be, crazy enough. Next week, early October, we start to see the average peak foliage for parts of Montana into Minnesota and Wisconsin, even the Northeast starting to change. More of the mountain areas of New Mexico and the higher elevations, of Texas and even Arizona here. And then all the way down that scale there in the green is where you'll find
very green.
Texas and a lot of the southern states. We have to wait till November here. And if I zoom even further down to just our area, it's usually about early November in the hill country and then middle to late November as we get into Austin Metro in our eastern counties here. I know a lot of the foliage we have, is out there in the hill country, but we definitely get some of them. I notice from my years here that right along the lakes, we see the turning of the leaves first. We get some really good colors there with the trees along Lady Bird Lake in the middle of Austin, but that's just kind of the average peak foliage, and they'll use climatology of that to figure out, what those different times would be. But it also kind of lines up with shorter days and cooler temperatures. Yeah. Those two indicators from the environment are what the trees are looking for. Shorter daylight and the cooler temperatures. Now, daylight is basically determined by Earth's position to the sun. In the fall season, and really as we get into fall and winter, we're tilting, away from the sun. That's something that we always remind you. People think, oh, winter, it's just Earth getting away from the sun. It's the tilt. So we're tilting further away from the sun in the northern hemisphere during the fall and the winter months. And so that's not changing, right? But the temperatures would be, as we get into the later part of fall, cooler temperatures and the shorter daytime. And I mean by not changing as in that's going to happen no matter what.
Color changing.
The color changing and some of the cooler temperatures, which is weather dependent, which could fluctuate every single year, right? That's what we're looking for here, and that's what we track. The science behind it, when it comes to, okay, yes, we're getting shorter days. Yes, we're seeing the cooler temperatures. What's happening? Well, the chlorophyll, which is the green pigment within a leaf, starts to break down with the cooler temperatures and the less daylight that the leaf is getting. So the chlorophyll, in part, is responsible for feeding the tree, part of photosynthesis. It's absorbing sunlight, making food for the tree. So when you're seeing less of that with less daylight and cooler temperatures, that chlorophyll starts to break down. And when that chlorophyll starts to break down, it allows more of the yellows and the oranges to be shown.
The fall colors.
The yellow and oranges are always there. They're just kind of masked by that chlorophyll, by that green. So, every leaf is going to have the orange, the yellow, and the green. And by that, I'm trying to make it very digestible.
Yeah.
If we want to get real crazy, it's every leaf has the carotene and the xanthophyll and the chlorophyll, right? The actual chemicals, the pigments there. But we can think of that as a carotene being the orange, the xanthophyll being the yellow, and the chlorophyll being the green. There's always going to be the green there, the chlorophyll in the leaf. It's as we get cooler and as we see less of the daylight hours in the fall time, the green starts to go away, allowing or unveiling the yellows and oranges that are always there in our leaves that just kind of get hidden by the green. Now, the red, the anthocyanin, is actually a sugar that produces that more red color there. So that's what we see happening during the fall. Less of the green, the chlorophyll breaking down, more of the yellows, more of the oranges, and more of the reds. And the bright colors are more likely when we start to get into some of those dry, sunny, and cool weather patterns. That's what the trees are looking for. That's when we see the brightest of the reds, the brightest of the oranges and the yellows. And of course, it depends on the tree too. If you've ever been to Colorado and this time of year, you know that the aspens are what everybody looks forward to, is the turning of the aspen trees in Colorado in the Rockies there. And there are these brilliant yellow colors there.
Wow.
So this is kind of the science behind it. So what I like to say when I go into the classrooms of, why do the leaves change colors? I always tell them, just like us, our trees, they need food. And the green is what's providing the food for the trees. Well, the food in the green needs the sun. And when we see less and less of that sun getting closer to winter, there's less and less of the food, and that allows the yellows and the oranges to come through.
And does that also cause the yellows and the orange leaves to fall off the tree?
That's a lot of it. It's just kind of the tree almost hibernating, if you will, when we're seeing less of the favorable ingredients for growth, right? Because you need the carbon dioxide and you need the sunlight for food. The tree's not dying, but it does let go of those leaves as we get into the winter months. Some of the trees don't. Some of the trees will hold on to their leaves during the winter, but a lot of them will shed it. Yeah. And then the process kind of starts all over again once we get into spring, right? We're seeing more and more of the daylight, seeing warmer temperatures. And so more of the chlorophyll is producing more food for the tree to grow big and strong, just like us. So it's kind of a neat process here. Like I said, with the sunny, cooler, and drier days, that is an environment that we see a lot those kind of weather conditions in the Northeast this time of year, right? Where the humidity doesn't reach as far up towards, upstate New York and parts of the northeastern corner of the United States. Same thing in the Rockies. You're not seeing the high humidity like we are here in Central Texas,
Which we definitely are.
which we definitely are right now. Yeah, I would not expect any of these oranges and yellows anytime soon. I mean, yes, we will get drier behind this cold front today, but you're looking for extended periods of the sunny, cool, and dry weather, and that's what happens when we talk about leaves changing in the fall. Is the breakdown of the chlorophyll, the going away of the green, allowing the yellows and allowing the oranges, and eventually the sugars that produce the reds. And then sometimes you get like the leftover or wasted metabolism out of a tree. So like the leftovers of the food and what it's producing, and that produces the browns that we oftentimes see here in Central Texas.
So we know what is causing these leaves to change. We know that it has to do with the tilting of the sun and the time that we have the sun here, here in Texas specifically. But do we know if anything is interfering with this lately? And what I'm referring to is like climate change or something else that may be interfering with that change.
Yeah, great question. So I've got a couple of explainers here that I wanted to talk about. You mentioned the cooler temperatures, right? Well, fall nights absolutely affect the fall color of the trees here, or the leaves specifically. So when you're looking at warmer nights, which we are with the change in climate, we get to more of the duller colors there, the browns, if you will. And this is provided by our partners at Climate Central, who are outstanding in tracking these changes that we're seeing on more longer term. Again, climate change more longer term, not just night to night. With the cooler nights that kick in simultaneously with the shorter daylight, you're seeing more enhanced colors here. So this would tell us that with changing climate, in our future, maybe we see duller leaves in the fall because the nights aren't getting quite as cool as they were before. Looking at, just the complexity of all this, if we see an earlier start to the changing of leaves, and that could be due to drought and heat stress. It's interesting because a lot of people think, well, we had so much rain in the summer, like we should have a really good fall foliage event. Well, that's not necessarily the case when we think about, we still had 20 plus days of triple digit heat.
Rain.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we're well below normal with our September rainfall before today, and we finished August below rainfall as well. The drought and the heat stress, unfortunately, it doesn't go away with just one big weather event, especially drought. We spend more months in drought than not here in Central Texas. And so that's something we look at, an early start to the triple digits or the summer warming. I mean, we had triple digits in May this year. So that could also affect the fall foliage. And then even storm damage, something, like the flooding that we had in July, kind of tweaking what is normal for a tree, especially you think of all the trees that unfortunately got ripped up in the Guadalupe River flood.
Too much water.
That's going to affect fall foliage. And then maybe a later turning of the leaves would be due to the warmer fall nights or a warmer October in general, which I know Chief Meteorologist Nick Bannon is going to be talking about later today, kind of the outlook for October. And spoiler alert, it is going to be on the warmer side, it looks like. Yeah, and then some lower wind speeds as well. So these are the different factors that Climate Central looked at as far as, what could cause some of the fall foliage to start earlier than normal and what could cause the fall foliage to turn later than normal. Kind of going back to answer your question as to like what could happen with climate change.
Yeah. So we know that here in Central Texas, we're starting a little later in November to see this fall foliage come out. I'm pretty used to that gray area of your map that you shared. That was like January, February fall foliage, because that's where I'm from. But is that a normal for us in Austin? Did we used to start earlier? How did it used to look like?
I think because we're in the southern states and we're in some of the lower latitudes, like it does take a while for our temperatures to cool down. Typically, you think of October, right? Our afternoon highs start in the upper 80s at the beginning of the month of October. By the end of the month, our average highs drop to the 70s. And then with our overnight temperatures, which is what these trees and leaves are taking as cues, we typically see those upper 60s in the morning to start the month, and then eventually those 50s. So it just kind of depends on the tree, depends on a lot of that as to when exactly that type of tree will start that process of turning leaves. But, because we're so far down in latitude, I would think November is probably a normal, if you will, for this area. I think what kind of concerns me a little bit is if climate change is resulting in these warmer nights overall, either the colors that we do see turn here in central Texas in November, which again isn't quite as vibrant as some of the higher elevations elsewhere.
Yep.
If those colors are a little bit more muted, maybe it's not quite as impressive as it was 30, 50 years ago. Or we start to see it get pushed even later into December. I mean, imagine if our leaves start to change here in Texas
In December.
In December, right? And because I always feel like there's a very little window in general when it comes to fall here in Texas. Exactly,
I
right?
agree.
I lost my earring, so I just got to take this one out because it's going to bother me only having one dangle. It's a hard balance here because it seems like more often than not we go summer, 2 weeks of fall, winter.
Freeze.
Right? Yeah. And we get our first freeze. And I think a lot of people here in Central Texas feel that way, right? But you don't necessarily move to Texas thinking, we're going to have these beautiful, vibrant falls. Yeah. That's not quite our reality. You move to places like, Aspen, Colorado, or Denver, or up in the Northeast for those kind of fall seasons. And a lot of people do go leaf peeping to go enjoy that. But here in Central Texas, or here in Texas as a whole, you can see we do have climatologically speaking, some spots where the leaves do turn, especially as you get up into the Panhandle and further north here. But I would hate to think that with warmer nights, we lose some of the color that we have or that we've been used to, or we delay it even further.
Yeah. Well, Kristen, we're nowhere near seeing this fall foliage
Not yet.
right now, but you did touch a little bit on how you've seen the fall foliage closer to the water here in Central Texas.
Yes.
Where are other spots that we can find that fall foliage?
Every year we get photos from the state parks. The state parks is where I would definitely go to if you were interested in this. And one of the reasons why I bring this up now at the end of September is because those weekends get booked in the fall and in the early winter because it's nice out to be outside,
to be camping,
right?
Yeah.
So I think of Enchanted State Park out there towards or Enchanted Rock State Park, I should say, in Fredericksburg. Exactly. I meant to actually look that up. Give me a second because there's one, Maples, I believe, State Park here in Texas that I've heard some really good things. It's actually on my bucket list. But I believe it's Maples State Park.
Let me see if I can search it.
Yeah. And that's one of the hot spots that I remember covering for.
Oh, you can already see the fall foliage in the Google photos of this place.
It's so pretty, right? So if this is your thing, like if the turning of the leaves is your thing, I highly encourage you to make those reservations because I do know it gets booked up very quickly.
Here, show this. This is Lost Maples.
See? That's it. Lost Maples. Okay. Yeah. I was sort of on the right track.
This is very cool.
Yeah, I thought, it's one of those things, you get some of the oranges and you get some of the yellows. Maybe it's not quite as widespread as areas.
But it's still there.
It's still there. It's still there. And I think it's if you can get in, absolutely. Do that in the November time frame, then I think you would definitely get your money's worth out of booking that trip.
Yeah. Some places, or a place that's really slept on that I used to go every fall when I was in college in San Marcos was Wimberley. Just walking around Wimberley, all the fall foliage is so beautiful.
I'm so glad you said that because, being part of the hill country, Wimberley, Driftwood, even being in Dripping Springs, I noticed it with some of my trees. I purposely put an oak tree in my front yard because I wanted to see the change in the leaves in the fall. And then I went,
how big is your oak tree?
It's interesting because I moved in, 5 years ago. And he was just a little baby oak by that time, but now he's a teenager oak. And his leaves do turn. He sheds most of it during the winter. I act like it's a person. The tree sheds most of the trees.
It is a person.
Yeah. But I can get some really good colors, especially as we get towards Halloween, because, you know, we are cooler in the hill country faster than we are in the Austin metro. So Halloween and beyond, you get some really good turning of the oaks. And then in the springtime, I actually put right next to my oak a red bud, which blooms in the spring.
Ooh.
So I get the colors in the fall, the yellows and the oranges on my oak. And then come probably, I think it's like March, April, depending on how quickly we warm up, I get these really hot pink flowers on my red bud. So
that is such
hot
smart
tip. Yeah.
planting.
But when it comes to fall foliage here, yes, it does take a little while for it to kick in November. This was actually something that I showed you on TV on Monday when we did see the autumnal equinox at 1:19, but I just wanted to put it on your radar because we encourage you to, at the change of every season, which is obviously quarterly, to check in on some of these household chores that might get forgotten about every day. New batteries in the smoke detectors. Obviously, we're not going to encourage you to do that every day. So quarterly is a good time to
Can't
do that.
forget about that.
Yep. Check the filter in the HVAC system, especially here in Central Texas. We know our pollen season can get crazy in the springtime.
Right now.
Yeah. The dust with the Saharan dust plumes that come in during the summer, making sure you're staying on top of that. Because I think a lot of maybe out-of-towners or Texas transplants like myself, we don't realize that, you know, the HVAC system and those filters can get real dirty real quick compared to other areas in the United States. So changing out that air filter in your HVAC system, and then just checking the power on your weather radio. Most of them just you leave plugged in, but there's also battery backup. So making sure you at least have like a little couple pair of double A's right next to it just in case.
Yeah, something too when the leaves start to fall is making sure you clear them out of your gutters frequently.
Yes.
Because they accumulate there a lot.
Yeah, that's a really good point. You know, making sure that the house is kind of clear of debris of because if not, it becomes a fire hazard. But something that I've learned in my years of being here in Central Texas and working with Travis Audubon is they encourage you to leave the leaves in the yard, in your grass and in your flower beds because and I'm like, say less. Like
my HOA does not encourage
me
to do that.
I know. That's what I'm thinking. But it's one of those things they recommend because it allows like the bugs and the creepy crawlies to sit underneath those leaves and the birds. And we are a major pathway for fall migration here in Central Texas for our aviation friends. The birds will come and they'll eat all the little creepy crawlies that are hiding underneath those leaves. So leave the leaves if you can. You know, obviously not in the gutters like you said, but with something like if you've got a flower bed. Yeah, I know I've got a couple magnolia trees that are starting to shed already in the flower beds. I'm like, heck, if they can, you know, support caterpillars or whatever else the birds need to eat, like I'm not about to pick those up. So that is a really good point. I'm glad you triggered my memory on that because fall migration continues until the end of October into November even. And there's a couple big dark sky communities here in Central Texas. By that I'm meaning like purposed effort to keep skies at night as dark as possible. Yeah. So any porch lights, turning those off. Any lights uplighting that you might have on the house or on trees outside, making sure those turn down during the fall because, again, bird migration is underway. And sometimes when you've got lights and a lot of light pollution, it can disorient them or confuse them. So just make an effort, put the porch light off at night before you bed. Make sure those uplights aren't pointing directly at the sky. And I think that's an easy way to help wildlife this time of year.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't even know that. In my neighborhood, what I get around this time of year is wild hogs.
Ooh, yikes.
In the yard.
Okay. Yeah, that's a little scary. I will tell you, being in Dripping Springs, we are a dark sky community. Mm-hmm. So even in my neighborhood, we don't have street lights.
Oh,
like
wow.
they don't put those in there. So it does make the street pretty dark at night. But they're very cautious and purposeful about making sure that it's our home just as much as their home, wildlife, right? So doing whatever we can to live cohesively and simultaneously without as much impact on one another.
And we're not using it at night, so let them have
it. I know, exactly. Yeah, I haven't had any problems either, you know? And like I said, they can have lights that maybe shine down towards the ground as long as it's not put up. And I think a lot of the lights that they're talking about is sometimes you've got like
those Halloween strobe lights that you put outside that are always flickering up and they're like flickering.
Those and even like the lamps that people have in their front yards that just illuminate all around like 360. Those we want to turn off. But that's something easy we can do to just help our bird friends out. I'm trying to think if I've got anything else.
What about for anyone, once we start seeing these leaves fall and change colors, how can they send us those photos? Because I know you like to get them, right?
Yes. Report it at KXAN.com. I believe I can actually show you, because obviously our leaves aren't changing yet.
Not yet.
I believe I had some from last year if you'd like to see, because when we do get into that season, I like to put those on TV. I think it's fun and it's encouraging.
When we get a little bit of ice and snow, we always get those photos. So why not give us leaf photos?
And we do have the even the competition, the like photo of the month that we do.
Yes.
There's this really fun graphic that you might have seen this before.
Let's see.
This is something that we did last year. And so these aren't current, but these were viewer photos that you guys sent in to us, and we showed them on air of just some of the changing colors. So if you do happen to go out to Lost Maples or Enchanted Rock or any of the state parks, or even your backyard, and you see some of those fall foliage views, let us know. Snap a quick pic, send it to reported@kxan.com. And just make sure to include your name and where you took it, so I can give you proper credit on TV like this. And we'd love to show them off to everybody else.
Yeah, that would be great. And we can also show them here on Kristen's Classroom. Anywhere we can put them, we will put them.
Yes. Right? Which, speaking of which, I've got some school visit photos. Would you like to see?
Yes, I would.
Okay. So this was, let me think about it. This was last Thursday. This was Windermere Elementary, their first graders, and they were very, very sweet. So I've actually been to Windermere a couple of times now, but they had some great questions for me. They asked, when do we see tornadoes? When do we see hurricanes? And these are fresh first graders, So I was pretty impressed. We did the tornado in a bottle, of course.
That's cool.
A hit with the littles.
We have to do that here.
I know. I was thinking about that. It is very tall, obviously.
We can find a different space.
Yeah, I'll have maybe video and send it in. But I do the tornado in a bottle with the littles. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to go and speak with the students at Eanes ISD, their adult transition services and special education. And, with the bigger kids, with the grown-ups, I do a lot of just weather safety.
Are they still interested as much as the littles are?
Absolutely. And because it's a different language as far as, how I explain things and the things that I want to make sure that they take away and are able to digest. We do talk about tornado safety even with the littles, but with the grown-ups, with the big kids, I always tell them, there's a good chance that you might be home by yourself when a tornado threat arises. So let's make sure we're talking about this now. That way, when that tornado threat does come, it's kind of second nature. You're not hesitant as to what you need to do. So we do a lot of talk just about where to go in our home during a tornado, where to go in our home if there's a flood. So I had a great conversation with them.
So sweet.
Yeah, Eanes ISD Adult Transition Services, and just a special shout out to my friend Will. He loves weather. He said anything but the cold. He does not do cold.
Well, Texas is perfect for that.
Exactly, right? More often than not, you're pretty safe from that here in Central Texas. But he just kind of pulled at my heartstrings. He was saying he just loves weather, and he works at the Whataburger over there in Westlake. So if you see him,
say hi.
Say hi. Give him a little shout out. Say, I saw you on TV. Saw you on KXAN, because he was a pretty big sweetheart. But and like I told you last week, every Tuesday, Thursday, I'm somewhere in Central Texas doing a weather talk.
Somewhere.
In some school somewhere. And I love doing it. I haven't quite gotten into the fall foliage discussion yet. We're doing more so just like, here's what we see when it comes to weather. And that's kind of like my basic, because I want them to get the nuts and bolts of like, what do I do if there's a hail or tornado or snowstorm, things like that. But eventually we'll get into why the leaves change color in the visits.
Maybe closer to when they actually start changing color.
I would think so. And it is very, what I've noticed just being in the classrooms for years now is if there's ever a very big weather event, that seems to be a very hot topic of questions with kids. And that's something that I encourage all parents and anybody listening to to think about because they see the news, right? They hear people talking about the big floods that happened in the summertime or the big winter storm we had a few years ago. There's always that natural curiosity with weather, with humans, you know, big or small. But when there's a big weather event that happens so close to home, I do encourage parents to talk about with their kids because I do think, you know, it opens the door for conversations about flood safety too, about what would we do if there was a flood, you know, but just not ignoring it because it is a reality of living in Central Texas. Yeah. Sometimes the weather can hurt us and sometimes the weather can get dangerous, and opening the door for that conversation after a big weather event can not only make, hopefully, any sort of future event less dangerous, but also maybe spark the curiosity to learn more about it. You know, a lot of what I do in the classroom is just that, is hopefully one day one of those kids will replace me when I'm old and moldy on TV and be the next meteorologist in the morning at KXAN. So just sparking that STEM interest too can be kind of like a side effect, a happy side effect of opening that conversation with kids.
Yeah, it's a great learning experience, and real-time learning experiences are always better. So
yeah, and I say that because more recently I've gotten a lot more questions about flooding, you know, right after the Round Rock tornado. All the questions I got in the school visits were about tornadoes. And there's still a healthy amount about tornadoes now, but I've gotten way more flooding questions than I ever have in my 6 years being here in Central Texas, living in Flash Flood Alley. But I attribute that because of the flooding conversations and the flooding tragedy we had just a few months ago.
Yeah, of course. Kristen, thanks so much for sharing all of this with us. I know that you have an article for anyone who is interested in also reading up on what we discussed. Is there anything specific that you want to share about the article?
You know, I don't think so. Just another courtesy and shout out to our friends at explorefall.com. They're the ones who give us the data as far as the peak foliage. If you've got any questions, let me know. And again, I'll end with, if you see anything that you think is pretty, there's a good chance everybody else is going to think it's pretty too when it comes to
picture, please.
the fall foliage. So report it at KXAN.com. Name, where you took it. We would love to give you a shout out when it comes to the leaves eventually changing here in Central Texas.
Not quite yet, but soon.
November. Mark your calendar. Big circle around November. That's the month for leaves here where we live.
Yes. Well, thank you for joining us, Kristen, and we will see you next week.
See ya.